Tonight, so I will be chairing the meeting. Can we start with a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. Okay. First order of business is a student grievance appeal. Can I ask whoever is making the appeal to step to the podium?
Yes, so Robbie, tonight we have Mr. and Mrs. Nelson who are here to the appeal. And just to remind the board, this is an opportunity for this family to appeal a disciplinary decision that occurred. And after they provide information for the board will adjourn after the meeting and make their decision as it relates to this particular situation. They are allowed to provide information in writing or orally, whichever they prefer. And then again, the board can uphold the decision, can modify the decision, or deny the appeal. So those are the options before the board.
I have both written, and I'm taking the liberty to write my comments because
We need to get your, yeah, there we go.
I've written out my comments because frankly, although I've been to a lot of meetings in this room and even made a presentation at the last council meeting, you guys make me nervous. So I want to say what we feel is important and get my point across without trying to ramble too much. I will say that personally, I'm not a person who likes conflict, and I'm a real rule follower. So to be here tonight is big for me. I wouldn't make this presentation if I didn't feel it was important, if I didn't feel the importance of the effect on my son and other students. So I was told you received history on this, but I'll review a little bit. My son wrote a history paper for a classroom-based assessment and was given an academic honesty violation because of incorrectly citing a source. The assignment ended up being a perfect storm of problems for him. Because it was a CBA, the teacher could not provide help. Because it was a CBA, there was no rough draft turned in, no peer editing, no teacher review, none of that. In general, writing is not his strength, and he would be the first one to admit that to you. And this was the only paper they wrote second semester. If you've had a chance to review the paperwork packet and read his paper, I think you'd agree that incorrectly citing a source is certainly not the only problem with his paper. With his paper, he struggled with his topic, one that he didn't know much about. He struggled with finding the right number and types of sources. I know he was very stressed about it. It came just before finals and was worth 100 points, so it was a huge assignment. They did have adequate time, and he didn't procrastinate. I know how many nights he spent working on this. When I received the notification of the violation, I was surprised knowing how hard he'd worked. And in my mind, I was thinking, why did he decide to make such a poor decision to cheat after working so hard on this paper? I didn't realize at the time he'd done something accidentally. I think my initial email to his teacher after I received the notification speaks to this fact. It's not a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh no, my son couldn't have possibly done anything wrong. Not until he came home and showed me his paper did I know the nature of his supposed plagiarism. And at that point, I decided to stop trying to decide if I could ground him for life for cheating and became concerned. And frankly, I was a little shocked that this constituted a violation, but according to the academic honesty policy, this does. So what is the purpose of the academic policy? That's the question I have as I evaluate this policy in regards to my son's situation. In my mind, the policy exists to encourage students to do their own work, to receive the most from their education. I understand that the consequences of violating the policy need to be sufficient enough to help deter students from making poor choices, and when it comes to matters of cheating. But as I look at the particulars of what my son did and what the consequences and ramifications have turned out to be, I feel this policy goes far beyond this. This is directly affecting his chances at and choices of colleges. There's a triple effect of a lowered class grade, then it lowered his GPA, and when colleges look at his transcript, they will see the violation flag. He was just finishing his sophomore year, and per the high school's paperwork, had never been and was not, and I will say is not currently, an attendance, academic, or disciplinary problem. Then without purposefully trying to do anything wrong, his future is severely affected. The first sentence of the policy reads, the integrity, this is a quote, the integrity and success of the academic community is based in large part on a sense of trust between students and faculty. And I get that staff need to and should have the commitment from students that they will do their best, that they'll be engaged, that they'll do their own work. But shouldn't students feel that they can trust staff as well? The sentence says between. Can't a staff member question something that looks funny, like my son's incorrect citation, when he cites the source in another place? He did not correctly quote a source, but he did cite it on his works cited page. Can't they ask a student to explain what's going on? If my son had used the quote, and when asked about it, said it was all his own words, that's violating the trust. But when he was asked, he said he used the information and said I did cite it and pointed to his works cited page. He's clearly lacking skills, but in no way did he mean to pass this off as his own. There was no help given afterwards, and in our meetings, no advocacy for him by anyone at school. That's a personal disappointment to me when I have been told about how Eastlake tries to make a big school smaller, to have adults that really get to know the kids so they have people they feel they can go to. And when the Lake Washington School District mission and values paperwork specifically speaks to, quote, personalization and individual attention. I find it difficult also to understand why the policy states regardless of intent. I think most people, when they think of cheating and plagiarism, think of bringing unauthorized notes into a test or copying off someone's paper. Those things that are willful and knowing acts to act in a dishonest way. To me, there's a big difference depending on the intent. If I knowingly use someone else's paper and turn it in as my own, that seems to me to be more severe than without intending to incorrectly citing a source. Yet the consequences are exactly the same. Another issue I have is the complete cessation of the educational process once a student has been flagged with the policy violation. I would guess that there are some students who don't care whether they cheat or not, but I would wonder what drives most to do it. My thought would be they lack confidence in their abilities or they lack skills. If I'm worried I can't remember everything for a test or feel like I don't know how to do something, I might make a poor decision and cheat. In Cameron's case, he didn't know it, but he lacked skills and therefore made a huge error on his paper. In this instance, he received a 0 with no chance to rewrite. For his class, after they turned in the paper for the CBA, students then had their papers reviewed, returned, and had a week to edit and revise and turn back in for their grade. That was where the 100 points came from. Because Cameron had the policy violation, he was not allowed to do this. What kind of sense does it make for a struggling writer who obviously doesn't have a good grasp on quoting and citing sources to receive no teacher feedback or instruction or any opportunity to be allowed to rewrite a paper or improve it? I emailed the principal and teacher and asked that he be given feedback and allowed to rewrite the paper even though it was for no grade. He needed the help, he needed the practice, whether it was for a grade or not. If I have a student who violates this policy, I would want to know why and see if we could get them some help to improve their skills, to improve their confidence, to see where they need support in or out of the classroom. It doesn't seem right to me that students are not expected to do the work, nor are they given any help in their areas of weakness. At the end of our hearing with Dr. Lyon, he spoke very directly to Cameron and told him that he hoped he never found himself in this type of situation again. He emphasized the seriousness of all this. And while I don't disagree, I'd also like to point out that Cameron never in a million years dreamed he'd find himself in this situation. Mr. Beatty was also very assertive with him at our first meeting, asking him, do you know what would happen to you if you did this in college? You'd get kicked out, he told him. Unfortunately, the application of the academic honesty policy in his sophomore year in high school for an unintentional mistake may have already kicked him out of college. If you can get kicked out of college for misciting a source, and the Lake Washington School District academic honesty policy says you're a plagiarist if you incorrectly cite a source, and the consequences are so far-reaching, when do you get to learn to do this without fear of an error? Furthermore, it's personally disheartening to be told by Mr. Beatty that, quote, with 1,400 students at Eastlake year after year, we just can't take individual circumstances into account. That's so completely opposite to what I've witnessed as a volunteer and a PTSA officer in the past 14 years. But if that's what happens when there's an issue or once you get to high school, then I think parents need to know that so they can have this discussion with their kids. If that's the case, then this entire appeals process is a waste of everyone's time, since no individual factors can ever be taken into account. I'm going to hope that this isn't a waste of time and say ideally for Cameron, I'd like to see his paper count towards his grade, whatever grade that is, because I acknowledge it's not a perfect paper, and the violation removed from his transcript. That removal had been discussed as a possibility at an earlier meeting, and he asked about it again at our hearing with Dr. Lyon, but nothing has been said about it. I feel that putting the academic honesty policy violation on his transcript does not describe him as a student or a person. And it's overreaching in terms of consequences in this case. It would be unfair for colleges to get the wrong idea about him and overlook him before he even gets started. For students in general, as a PTSA officer and involved parent, I'd like to see some changes in the policy. One, if students aren't given a chance to explain themselves or their issues taken into account, then the trust part of that policy needs rewriting. Secondly, I think intent is a vital part of determining academic honesty or dishonesty. If you choose to retain that language, it would be helpful to see some further explanation about citing sources as other schools do. 3, nowhere does it tell you a consequence will be that your transcript will reflect this violation forever for every college to see. It would be helpful for parents and students to see that as part of the policy and understand what that means. Specifically to the Eastlake Student Handbook, it would be better if the policy that's stated on page 12 and 13 correlated with the table on page 20 for the sake of consistency. And finally, students need to do their work. If you use a friend's paper, you should have to write your own. If you copied answers on a test, you should have to retake it. Teachers need to be able to see where your problem is and then where help can be given. And finally, not specifically to the policy, but if individual circumstances have no bearing on how students are treated in their schools, then 1, I guess my suggestions don't mean anything, but 2, there needs to be some real education and frank conversation with families, because that's not the message that the parents I know and work with understand from this district.
I will try to be brief but succinct. Kathy described the events. Let's be clear, we're talking about 2 sentences in a paper that were factual in nature. It was a series of dates leading up to the initiation of World War I. He claimed in his testimony to the adjudicator that he was confused whether or not that specific section needed to be specifically put in quotations or simply called out in the bibliography. When he was confused, he could not go to his classmates, nor when he went to the teacher's website was there any documentation relating to how to correctly cite work, specifically something like that. So not in the document that the school provides of the honesty code, nor on the teacher's site was there anywhere he could go solicit advice. Okay? Where I get concerned is on twofold. I have a very large problem when you define my son as dishonest. That is not a trait that we take casually in our home. Secondly, I have a problem with the implementation of the policy, and I will talk about that in a second. But let's go real briefly to what Webster defines dishonest. Characterized by a lack of truth, honesty, or trustworthiness. And in their discussion further around synonyms, dishonest implies a willful perversion of truth in order to deceive, cheat, or defraud. Deceitful usually implies an intent to mislead. I respect that plagiarism fits those definitions. Cameron's actions do not. So if we look at the core here, where I really struggle is because we had a state assessment, he was not able to solicit assistance. The teacher then chose to take that assessment and make it a graded exercise. I want to emphasize, every single person in that class had every opportunity for the next 5 days to rewrite their paper, to fix grammatical errors, to fix errors in syntax, quality of speech. He cited in the bibliography the source. He was never given an opportunity to explain it. He was tagged with an honesty violation, and that was the end of it. That is flawed. And if we look at the social strata here, when I talk to my professional colleagues, when I talk to the acquaintance, and I say, this is what's happening, their jaws drop, and they go, you're kidding. That can't be true. It doesn't fit. The punishment does not fit the infraction. The other thing that I will call out very clearly is that this policy that was referenced that could potentially get him kicked out of school, this school district's policy is more severe than the University of Washington's policy, which states that a professor can look at that instance and waive that. There is a 6-step process, not an all or none process. Linfield, so I was a graduate of Washington, my wife was a graduate of Washington, Linfield College, where my son is currently enrolled. Again, the professor has the right to make the determination, and it is a series of steps that can be influenced. The Skyline School District has the ability to, Issaquah School District has the ability to send a student back to remediation, to a tutorial, to refresh them on that. There is no one in this process who has said Cameron's intent or will was to cheat. It was an error in construction of the paper. This does not fit social construction. It does not fit intent. To take intent out of it is problematic and inappropriate. So our specific ask is that that paper is regraded by a third party, given the same 5 days to edit that paper like everyone else in that class was, and that the honesty violation is removed from his record. We simply cannot stand by and have our son tagged that way, both out of our own personal pride in him and our ability to put him forward for post-secondary education.
Thank you. So the board at this point has the opportunity to ask the family if they'd like any clarifying questions and/or clarifying questions of the administration. Our attorney is here as well if you have any process questions. I did want to point out just one point of clarification just for the family as well as for the board. There were several referrals to this showing up on the student's transcript. Something like this does not show up on a transcript, nor is it transmitted to a college that they're applying for. Those are typically disciplinary records which stay within the school. Colleges, of course, do ask if something like this has happened, and then it's the student's responsibility to report that. Many colleges do, not all colleges do. So I just wanted to make sure that you had that information.
Could I offer a point of clarification on that?
Yeah.
I did speak with Linfield College's admission officer, and they did say that they will ask for that from the student, and then you're asking my son to either lie or answer truthfully and potentially exclude him from college.
Right.
Well, and can I ask a question too? Because we had that discussion at one of our initial meetings, and I was led to believe that potentially if he kept his record clean, that could be removed from his transcript, and there was discussion about colleges seeing that, but it was never pointed out that that would only come from him. I was led to believe that that came from school and would be there for anyone to see.
Yeah.
So
And
that's where our concern
I,
lies.
of course, can't speak to the conversation, Chad, but I know that our practice, is that correct, Tracy? Our practice is that we do not send that to a college. We don't send those files. We actually had a policy conversation about that just this year, that we do not send those, that it's the student's responsibility to report or not report that behavior. So just for clarification, that's what we do.
Well, and again, I guess I'd ask that in that policy, if that's the case, one way or another, students need to know that if they have those violations on their record, the colleges will ask, when you're a freshman or a sophomore, you're not thinking along those lines.
Right.
To know that that is a possible ramification of being flagged with this violation.
Right. Okay. So any additional clarifying questions? And all of you have had access to the hearing recordings as well.
Anything?
I actually just have a comment. Thank you for bringing it to us in the context of a policy question. I'm very reluctant to ever intercede on the merits of a specific case, but I think the policy is worth exploring here. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the board will be discussing the next steps in executive session after the meeting, and we will get back to you within 10 school business days on what will happen now.
Excellent.
Okay.
Would you
Okay.
care for, I mean, this is my notes, but you don't need a copy of the Washington, or did you give them the Washington? Okay, never mind. I apologize.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Next up is consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, Chip, do you want to pull the board?
Chris?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Robbie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
And under tab number 6, we have the donations for this board meeting to the total of $38,728. We have a $1,150 donation from the Redmond High School PTSA to Redmond High School for library materials, $11,710 from the McAuliffe PTSA to McAuliffe Elementary School for a number of items, including a risograph, academic enrichment program, leadership stipend, and field day stipends. $11,059 from the Rose Hill PTSA to Rose Hill Elementary School to support field trips, assemblies, their resident art program, and office and copier use. And $14,809 from the Alcott PTSA to Alcott Elementary School, again for a variety of programs, including their ACT Club field trips, their running club, their stacking club, cup stacking club, don't know about that one, scholarships and library-related events, again for a total of $38,728 in donations. And again, we want to thank our community for the support of our schools through PTSA donations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see the continued support of the schools. And just to remind people, this only includes donations that exceed $1,000 because those are the only ones that are required for board approval. Okay. Next up is non-consent agenda.
Yep. Thanks, Robbie. Under tab 7, we have the first reading of board policy GP2E1, which is school board legal status. And as you know, every 10 years, as a result of the census, we're required by law to evaluate the school board director district boundaries. And last board meeting, we had a presentation around the redistribution of those boundaries. And as you know, there's been a population shift from one part of the district to the other. And as a result of that, we hired a consultant to come in and run the numbers for us and propose a set of boundary adjustments. Those boundary adjustments have been suggested to the board for your approval. We had a public hearing on those, and what you have in front of you is the first reading of the policy adjustment that aligns with that boundary shift. And once again, just for the public consumptions, I want to remind the public, and of course you know this, which is that the school board members, while they must live within a director district, are elected at large within the whole district. So if a director lives in Kirkland, people in Sammamish still vote for that director in that district. And by extension, board members represent the entire school district. So the purposes of a districting board is to make sure that the board membership is geographically distributed within the context of the school district. not so that they represent only a portion of the school district. So I just want to point out that point. And in your packet, of course, is also the proposed boundaries that are on deck for this reading.
Okay, and I believe this is not changed from what we reviewed in the public hearing in the last meeting, correct?
That's correct. And so if there's any questions for the board, and if there are no questions, then this will come to you next board meeting in the consent agenda.
I'm assuming we've had no public comment on this.
That's correct. No public comment.
I have no comment on it.
Okay, so we don't need approval or anything right now.
That's correct.
Okay.
The second item, Robbie, in the non-consent agenda tonight is the reading of ER 2 and 3. And as a reminder, we during the fall do a monitoring report on end results 2 and 3. We start with primary, then move to intermediate, then move to junior high school, then move to high school. Tonight is the ER 2-3 report for junior high school. Next year we'll call it middle school. And also just a point of clarification, we discovered that we made an error in terms of the month. This is actually the November report, and it's done early, if you can believe that. So we debated whether or not we should go ahead and do it tonight and decided to go ahead and do it tonight. But next year you'll have September will be primary, October will be intermediate, November will be junior high, and December will be high school. So we're just a couple weeks early on this report. So, Tracy.
Okay, so we're going to take just a minute to do an overview of end results and then get right into the monitoring report for junior high. Specifically, we're looking at the classes of 2017, 2016, and 2015. Those are our current 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. As in our previous ER reports for this year, we'll focus on literacy, math, and science, and end with kind of some data-informed actions and directions. Just as a quick overview, as Chip said, we'll do end result 1 in January. Our 2-3 schedule is as follows, and we're just a month ahead on junior high this year. For this specific junior high report, we'll look at report card data and large-scale assessment data and look at agreement between those two. And so with that, we'll get right into the report. Again, we're looking at these specific classes. It's a look back from, for our current 7th graders, we'll be looking at their 6th grade data. For our current 8th graders, we'll be looking at their 7th grade data. And for our current 9th graders, we'll be looking at their 8th grade data. As in past reports, we've got this color coding in place and in place in our board dashboard. For the KPIs for this particular report, we're looking at the standards-based elementary report card as well as the current junior high report card. And we're looking at MSP data, measurements of student progress, in reading, writing, math, and science. Just a couple quick reminders on the key performance indicators. For the current 7th graders, we're looking back to their standards-based elementary report card as one of the KPIs. That's a standards-based report card. Teachers use an online gradebook to record assessment events that are aligned to grade level standards and to report card areas. And those elementary grades are based on a trend of performance on the classroom assessments. We identified in previous reports that we're currently reporting literacy, reading, and writing together as one KPI. Same with math and science, and in next version of our dashboard, those will be separated out, but currently they're still together. For the current 9th graders and 8th graders, we're looking at their junior high report card, which currently is not a standards-based report card. It's a ABCD, and as we go through those, we'll look at how we've color-coded those in the KPI dashboard. For the MSP, the measurement of student progress, that's the state assessment. And here's what's required for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. 6th graders take an MSP in reading and math. 7th graders take reading, writing, and math. And 8th graders take reading, math, and science. So those are the MSP areas that we'll be looking at. So we're going to start with literacy. And for the class of 2017, these are our current 7th graders, their 6th grade report card, which measures these areas of writing and these areas of reading. We've got 1,860 students, and 72% of them, or 1,352, meet or exceed the standard in every single area of literacy based on the report card. So those would be our green and blue indicator here. 11% of our students need intervention or significant intervention in at least one area of literacy, and we don't have data for 294 of our students. For 230 of them, it's not applicable, but we do have 64 students where there wasn't a report. When we look at that same data disaggregated, we can see the areas where we've got, well, here's the total number of students within each disaggregated group that's shown at the top. And then we can see specifically which students in that group fall within needing intervention or significant intervention. And some of the same trends that we've seen in previous reports tend to hold true when we look at students who are in our special education program or students who are in our ELL program. And while we obviously don't show it here, we can identify each student by school and do crosstabs on this data to see where we really need to intervene to help students meet standard. For the class of 2017, when we look at their 6th grade reading MSP, 81% of the students meet or exceed the standard. 9% require intervention, and 4% require significant intervention. We don't have data for 99 of those students. When we look at that same data disaggregated, again, this is the 6th grade reading MSP. We can see where we've got groups of students or students who are within a particular group who need intervention, and also those who are meeting or exceeding the standard. When we look at agreement between these two measures, again, the report card is aggregating up all areas of literacy, reading, and writing. And so when we compare the report card or we look at agreement between the report card, we just have to keep that in mind that we're comparing reading and writing aggregated together with the state reading assessment. So you can see, we've got 11% of our students based on the report card measure who need intervention or significant intervention. And when we look at reading performance based on the MSP, that's 13% of our students needing intervention or significant intervention. We also want to look at the 6th grade reading trend over time. So again, these are different groups of students. So this is for the class of this 10, 11 is for the class of 2017, but we're looking now at different groups of 6th graders over time, and you can see that as a district we outperform the state, but we're tending to follow the same trend line as the state. We also look at how our students in the class of 2017 perform based on the 6th grade reading MSP compared to students in neighboring districts. So you can see that when compared to their colleagues, I guess, fellow students in neighboring districts, our students are performing well in reading. Okay, so we're going to move to the class of 2016. Now the data looks a little different because we're looking at current 8th graders and we're looking at their 7th grade report card, their language arts report card. So we've got 1,823 students, and when we look at who received an A or a B on their 7th grade language arts report card, 45% of those students received a B or an A. 32% of those students earned a C, and 14% of those students earned a D or an F. So in our current color coding methodology, our Ds and Fs are shown as red, our Cs are shown as yellow, and our Bs are green, and our As are blue. And we don't have data for 131 of our students. When we look at that data disaggregated for our current 8th graders, again, we can identify by disaggregation how students within a group are performing, and we're able to drill down and look at individual students and schools where they are to see where those interventions are needed. When we look at our current 8th graders, we've got 2 literacy-related measures to look at, and one is their 7th grade reading. So based on this measure, 71% of our students are meeting or exceeding the standard in reading as measured by the MSP. 19% require intervention and 6% require significant intervention. We don't have data for 73 of those students. Here's the disaggregated view of the 7th grade reading MSP. We also have their 7th grade writing MSP. 82% of our students are meeting or exceeding the standard in reading writing, in writing based on the MSP. 8% require intervention, 6% require significant intervention. And no data for 73 students. Here's that same 7th grade writing MSP disaggregated.
So the one that was I think two graphs ago, that was literacy from the grades, not this one.
So,
Or maybe it was 3 graphs ago, like before this.
so I'll quickly just go back. So this is grades. This is their 7th grade report card, their language arts grade.
Right.
And this is the disaggregation of the grade data.
So this is considerably worse than the MSP, I think, right? But maybe that's because it's reading and writing.
Right. So what will be helpful, I think, is this slide for us.
Okay.
When we do the agreement or comparison between the report card measure, the reading MSP, and the writing MSP, we start to see that variation. I mean, according to the report card grades, we've got 14% of our students getting Ds or Fs, 32% of our students earning a C. It's a little difficult to compare those two directly, whereas in the elementary, we've got a standards-based report card in place, and so we're really comparing a standards-based measure to a standards-based measure. Currently, in our junior high, we have a more traditional report card in place that's not a standards-based report card. So here we're comparing a report card grade to a standards-based measure. That's not to say that our teachers don't teach to the standards and don't assess on the standards in junior high, because they certainly do. But what goes into a report card grade varies more than it does at the elementary, because they're earning potentially there's different categories of projects and potentially participation and homework completion that go into the grade at the secondary.
Right. And in this one, for the LWSD report card, if you got a D in either reading or writing, then you're yellow.
Right, because the language arts,
Okay.
at the junior high, you get a grade for language arts. And
Oh, so it's only one grade.
It's one grade.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I see.
But there's definitely reading and writing that goes into that grade. So it's not split out like it is in the
Okay.
elementary report card.
Okay, but there is no particular effort right now to align the grades to. In this data, there has not been
Right,
such
but when
effort
we get
reflected.
to the kind of what action and direction we're
Okay, all
taking,
right.
I'll tell you a
Okay.
little bit about where we're headed potentially with the middle school report card.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Okay, and then we also have the trend over time look for 7th grade reading. Again, our students outperform the state average, and the trend line is tending to follow the state trend line. That's the reading measure, and here's the writing trend for the 7th grade MSP writing measure. When we look at the comparison with neighboring districts, you can see how our students, what percent of our students are at standard on the 7th grade reading MSP compared to 7th graders in neighboring districts, and how our students perform on the 7th grade writing MSP compared to neighboring districts and also the state average. Lastly, we've got the class of 2015. These are our current ninth graders. It's their eighth grade report card. Again, we're still in literacy here. We've got 1,689 students in the class of 2015. When we look at their performance based on their grade in language arts, 47% of them are on track or advanced in terms of getting a B or an A. 28% of them are currently earning C's or earned a C on their eighth grade report card, and 16% earned a D or an F. We have no data for 167 students. 136 of them are in the not applicable category, and 31 we've got no report. When we look at that data disaggregated, we can see student performance in the disaggregated groups. And then we've got reading MSP data for these students. Based on this measure, 82% of the students are meeting or exceeding the standard in reading. 8% require intervention and 5% require significant intervention. We have no data for 79 students. Here's that eighth grade reading MSP disaggregated. We also have for our current ninth graders their performance on their seventh grade writing MSP. So based on their performance on the seventh grade writing state assessment, 77% of them meet or exceed the standard. 7% require intervention and 11% require significant intervention. We have no data for 79. And here's that seventh grade writing measure disaggregated.
I was going to ask something on that previously. So, for example, the current seventh graders had something around science, and that's going back 2 years to when they were fifth graders on the MSP? Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yep.
So we report the most recent assessment in that space.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, can
looking
I
ahead.
make a comment on the last slide too?
Sure.
I can't, maybe I've mentioned this before, I don't remember, but it seems strange for literacy, like, so ELL is, I mean, by definition, going to not do that well on literacy, or they would not be ELL, right? Low income, I mean, there's not much to do about that except whether to show ELL or not, but low income, for example, may correlate with ELL, right? Like, can we split out, like, when we look at low income, like low income ELL or low income not ELL?
Yep, so in the dashboard now, it's kind of this third bullet around cross-tabbing. So we can cross-tab to see this disaggregation and this disaggregation to see how our low-income students who are ELL are performing. I don't
Okay.
have the screenshot view of that, but yes, we
Okay.
can do that.
And I'd encourage you to dig in yourself and do that, because you have the tool set to do that yourself. And if you want us to report on that, so if you're interested in a particular question or a particular theme that you see, then when we get together in January, then you'll be able to say, you know, we're particularly interested in this theme that we've been seeing, and then we can do a deep dive into that and bring that back to you in March.
I just think, I mean, when you show these reports, you know, or like these kinds of graphs in the reports, why not, I mean, just add one more column with that? Or I'd even be okay if you wanted to remove one of the others in favor of it.
Yeah, because I don't know how to do what you just said to do. We may have to just practice that at the retreat.
Okay, and we'd be happy to do that.
Ironically, for once, I'm with Nancy.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll, you know, why don't we put that in either the January or March retreat, whichever one we have the most time in, and actually spend some time doing that. And also I also wanted to let you know that the notes that you've given me a couple of times now on some reporting requirements, we've put that into the requirements pipeline. So the team that does this work is evaluating the viability of those requirements, and I'll be getting back to you and the whole board around the requirements request.
I don't see anything on here that tells me how I can manipulate the data that way.
Okay. We'll help you with that.
The other thing probably just worth mentioning about ELL is this measure, our ELL students who are in ELL because they need to acquire English language, we've got a different measure for that, the WLPT, and that's not what this is showing. So this is really those students' performance on the writing MSP, but there's a different measure to show if they're acquiring English language skills. And so and we'll be doing a board brief on that because we have that data back.
Okay.
So that's just an aside. So I think where we were, trying to remember where we were. Were we here? Okay, so this is the ninth graders, 7th grade writing MSP, disaggregated. Then we look at that agreement. And again, it's difficult to compare truly just, purely standards-based measures in the MSP with the report card because more things than just, more things can go into the report card grade. Like I said, homework completion, for example, and things like that. But based on this agreement, you can see that we've got, where we've got, the level of agreement between students who are exceeding or meeting the standard and where we're saying students need intervention. So based on our report card, we've got 16% of our students earning D's or F's, and we believe that they're requiring intervention. When you look at performance on the state assessment, 5% of them are far below standard in reading, 11% are far below standard in writing. We also can see the 8th grade reading trend over time. And in this particular one, you can see where we're tending to trend a little bit upward, where the state trend is a little more flat based on just this last year. And here's a comparison of the reading MSP for the class of 2015, how our students performed compared to students in neighboring districts.
But Tracy, we've only been doing the MSP for 1 or 2 years.
What they look at the trend over time, it's the WASL, since
Right,
that was the
but do we
standard-based
even,
measure.
actually, I think I asked this before. Do we have that much agreement between the WASL and the MSP? I guess it looks like we do.
The standards, the assessment is still measuring the standards. And so in that way, there's, even though the assessment itself might be different, or now it's online, whereas it hasn't been in the past, the assessments are still measuring the reading standards for 8th grade, even though the assessment's changed. So the state still shows the trend over time.
What the state promised when they developed the MSP as opposed to the WASL was that it would be shorter, which has some pluses and minuses, and it would be electronically delivered. They did not promise enormous changes to the assessment itself other than being shorter and with the exception of a few items. So direct correlations, we haven't done that work. So I couldn't tell you where it's deficit and where it's actually better.
Okay, so again, this was that comparison, and this is just reading MSP from 2010-11. And so we're ready to move into math and science. So similar kinds of slides. We've got our current 7th graders, class of 2017. This is the 6th grade report card. Again, math and science is currently showing together as one bar, and 1,860 students are in the class of 2017. 61% of them are meeting or exceeding the standard in all of the areas of math and science on the report card. 17% are in need of intervention or significant intervention in at least one of these areas. We have no data for 408 students. For 222 of those students, it's not applicable, but we do have 186 where there's no data reported. We look at that 6th grade report card data disaggregated. We can see where some of the no reporting comes in. And so it's, for example, if we look at special education based on a student's IEP. They may not be getting a traditional report card grade, but there's a separate progress report that goes home based on what's in the student's IEP. So some of this accounts for at least some of the why we have no data reported.
Why would ELL be so high, though, and not reported?
Yeah, that's, another question would be, are these, it's possible that, and we'd have to do the crosstab, that there might be some students who are both ELL and special ed.
Right.
So we'd have to drill down more and really see.
Or if you look at
Okay.
the schools that haven't reported yet.
Oh,
Might have something to do with it.
okay. Okay.
Here's their current seventh graders, their sixth grade math MSP. 75% are meeting or exceeding the standard. 10% require intervention, 9% require significant intervention, and we have no data for 99 students. Here's that math MSP data disaggregated. We also show their science MSP because they don't take a sixth grade science MSP, so our most recent measure goes back to fifth grade. It just incidentally, when we get to the classes of 2016 and 15, we know that this last year, or the most recent MSP for science, you'll see that they did change the test. They did focus the standards, and we saw a increase in performance on the science MSP in 2010-11. This group of students, though, this is based on their fifth grade science MSP from 2 years ago. So based on that measure, 51% meet or exceed the standard in all areas. 27% require intervention and 17% require significant intervention. We've got no data for 99 students. Here's that science MSP, fifth grade science MSP data disaggregated. We look at agreement between our report card and the math MSP and the science MSP. We can see some variation. Again, this is reporting out both math and science aggregated up together compared to math, compared to science performance on the state assessment. This slide shows the sixth grade math MSP trend over time. Again, different groups of sixth graders over time. You can see that we tend to follow the state trend, although we took kind of a dip between 09 and 10 and then are coming back up in 10-11. When we look at comparison with neighboring districts, you can see how our students performed on the sixth grade math MSP compared with neighboring districts. So compared to when we looked at the literacy, we tended to be outperforming some of our neighboring districts in literacy, and we're outperforming some of our neighboring districts in math, but we're a bit under some of our other neighbors in math. Moving on to the class of 2016, these are current eighth graders, and we're looking at their seventh grade math report cards. So when we now look, we do have a separate report card grade now for math and for science, because at the junior high, students are enrolled in two different classes. So this shows their performance on the math report card. 1,823 students, 44% of them are earning B's or A's, 32% earned a C in seventh grade math, and 14% earned a D or an F. We have no data for 150 students where it wasn't applicable, so there shouldn't be data there. Here's that seventh grade math report card data disaggregated. And here's our current eighth graders' science report card data. 44% of them earned a B or an A on their seventh grade science report card. 32% earned a C, 14% earned a D or an F, and we had no data for 175 students. 32 of them, it wasn't reported. So when we look at the disaggregation, we can start to see, at least by disaggregated group, where the data wasn't reported, and then we can kind of dig deeper into why and make sure that there shouldn't have been a grade. We also have the 7th grade math MSP for our current 8th graders. So based on that measure, 71% of them meet or exceed the standard in math. 13% require intervention and 12% require significant intervention. We have no data for 73 students. Here's that same data disaggregated for our current 8th graders. Again, this is their 7th grade math MSP. And this chart gives us a kind of level of agreement. So we've got their math report card, their science report card, and then the math MSP. They don't take, again, the science MSP is only in the 5th grade, so we didn't go back 2 years to look at their 5th grade MSP. Okay. We've got the 7th grade math trend over time. You can see that we trended, a bit downward compared to the more flat, slightly upward trend of the state this past year. And when we look at how our students performed on the 7th grade math MSP compared with students in neighboring districts, we can see that our performance was below that of our neighbors. Okay. And then we're moving on to the class of 2015. These are our current 9th graders. Starting with their 8th grade math report card, we've got 1,689 students. 42% of them earned either a B or an A on their 8th grade report card. 33% earned a C. 18% earned a D or an F, and we've got no data for 176 students. 29 of those, for 29 of those students, the data wasn't reported.
So on that slide, outside of the core LASS math science, there's a lot of not relevant, and that's why.
So, for example, if you look at our current 9th graders, they may or may not be enrolled in a world language class or in a fine arts elective. They have the 4 years in high school to earn credit in those areas. So just because you're not enrolled in a world language class in 9th grade doesn't make you not on track for graduation. So those students who aren't enrolled in a class, they're showing up in this gray band. For the students who are enrolled, here's how they're performing.
And would that be rolled up from previous years? So if they fulfilled the requirement,
Yes.
they don't have to, so we just keep propagating through.
Yeah, and just one correction, Tracy said on track for graduation, and what we're using, of course, is on track for being college ready. And foreign language, as evidenced in the policy change you guys made around graduation requirements, is a college readiness criteria for us.
And will be a requirement for the class of 2016.
Right. So, for example, that's why A's and B's are green and blue respectively, and a C is really yellow, because even though you can get a high school diploma with a C, you won't be university ready with a C.
And that yellow also means that we think intervention needs to happen. So we would want to understand why students were earning the grade that they did and see where we can help them perform even better. Okay, so here's that 8th grade math report card data disaggregated. And then we also have their 8th grade science report card data. 42% earned a B or an A. 31% earned a C, 17% earned a D or an F, and we've got 29 students where it wasn't reported. Again, when we look at the disaggregation, we can start to see some of, at least dig into why there wasn't data there. For our current ninth graders, we also have their eighth grade math MSP. So when we look at that, we've got 66% of our students meeting or exceeding the standard in math, 17% requiring intervention, and 13% requiring significant intervention. We've got no data for 79 students where it wasn't applicable, so they likely were not enrolled in our system when the MSP was given. And here's that math MSP data disaggregated. We also have a science MSP for current ninth graders. Based on that measure, 80% of our students are meeting or exceeding the standard in science, 9% are requiring intervention, and 6% are requiring significant intervention. No data for 79 students. And here's that eighth grade science MSP data disaggregated. We look at some level of agreement for our current ninth graders. We can see their math report card and their science report card compared to performance on the math MSP and the science MSP. So you can see some kind of interesting areas where there seems to be agreement, and then other areas where there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of agreement.
It's sort of coincidence, right? Like we haven't designed for this to be in agreement yet.
Yes.
Right.
That's
We'll
correct.
get to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. We can also look at the eighth grade math trend over time. So you can see we sort of had an interesting dip down from 09 to 010 and now back up in 11. And here's that trend for our eighth grade science. Okay, and finally, we've got the comparison chart with our neighboring districts, percent of our students who met the standard on the eighth grade math MSP. Just going to go back real quick. I want to make sure I didn't make a mistake. Okay. Pardon me. Okay. Nope, that's right. So how our students perform compared to students in neighboring districts. Apologize, there's an extra little 9 on this slide. And how our students performed on the eighth grade science MSP compared to students in neighboring districts. So our performance is not as good in math, better in science. Okay. Before we kind of move on to a couple of concluding slides of where we're headed, any other questions? Okay. So I've been wanting to just end each of these reports to give a little preview into what kind of some direction or actions that we're already beginning to take based on the data, knowing that there's action that happens at the district level, at the school level, and at the classroom level. At the district level, as we've talked about before, it's really our responsibility to make sure that we have good curriculum materials that align to standards and are available for teachers to help meet the needs of their individual students, particularly in some of the areas like ELL and special ed, where we saw that there's interventions needed. And it's our responsibility to make sure that that curriculum that we're providing professional development for teachers, it's being implemented with fidelity, and that we've got some assessments to measure the standards taught. So we're not just relying on that state assessment that happens annually in the spring, but we have some other measures in place. In addition to those measures making up the report card, we want to be able to pull them out and just look at them separately as well. So for secondary, we are continuing the work, and you heard Matt and Linda at the last work session go into detail about the work that we're doing around standards and proficiency scales and development of CDSAs, Common District Summative Assessments. We have a committee who's been working to look at a middle school report card and what could that and what should that potentially look like in the middle school, knowing that we'll have sixth graders and potentially sixth grade teachers who are used to a standards-based elementary report card, and we currently have in our junior highs a more traditional secondary report card. So we're looking into, and Robbie, that's what you kind of mentioned earlier, what are we doing? And we've been taking a look at that for ever since we started the plan to move to middle schools. So we're working on exactly what that's going to be, and the committee should have some recommendations in place by December, I believe. We also, as you heard Matt and Linda talk about at the last work session, we've got the Common Core standards coming on in 2013-14 in both English language arts and math. So we're starting to just build some awareness, and then we'll do more deliberate work around alignment. So we're ready for implementation in 2013-14 because we know that the state assessments will be assessing students on the Common Core beginning in 2014. And in terms of the data itself, we are working on principal and teacher views of the dashboard so that those interventions that happen at the classroom level and the building level can be done. Our intent is to make a data system where it's easier for teachers to know which students require intervention or significant intervention, and building SIPs, continuous improvement process plans aligned to those intervention areas and so forth. So that's work underway as well.
Tracy, it seemed like there was a consistent theme of slight underperformance in math and overperformance in reading and science across the middle level. Can you talk a little bit about what we're doing in math specifically as a result of those comparables?
What we're doing in math specifically at the middle level?
Yes, as a result of, because by comparison, it looks like we're struggling a little bit as compared to our neighbors.
That's a really good question. I mean, I would say at this point, we're in the looking at the data.
Okay.
And I mean, I can talk in general what we're doing around, standards and assessment and instruction. But what I'm not prepared to do is to say what targeted work, except for if you want me to talk about the goals, the math goals.
So is it fair to say that that's an area that we'll do a deep dive in and try and figure more of that out?
Yeah, and I think particularly, I mean, so to talk about it in the context of the math goals that were set last year, we know that math is an important area, and we chose to focus on that area for goal setting with the board and with individual schools last year. So schools did a lot of work to look at individual students who aren't achieving in math and to set goals for moving those students to standard, and are now in the process of, now that we see how those students' performance was on the last measure, what interventions were successful, what interventions weren't successful, and what new work needs to be done. So math is definitely a focus and kind of the priority area that we are continuing to look at. In November, when we come back to the board with math goals, we'll be reporting more specifically on math.
Okay.
Any questions from the board? I have a few. I thought I'd ask the other board members first, out of politeness. So, I mean, we saw a lot of, tables and figures, right? But, like, what are the things that really jump out at you? Like, Chip mentioned one thing. Like, are there any other things that kind of catch your eye from the data? Like the actions that you're taking kind of make sense, they're logical, but like which things kind of troubled you the most looking at all of this? Or impressed you the most, I suppose. Right?
I think, overall, our continued strong performance in literacy is encouraging. And, we're, for example, at elementary, we are continuing with the implementation of writing CDSAs for K-6, and that's longstanding practice that we've had in that area. So I think that we have strong performance in literacy. I'm continue to be have wonders about our math performance. And at the view that we see, it's really the district-wide view, and it becomes much more meaningful when you look at individual groups of students or school performance, and that's really what the schools do in the whole SIP and goal-setting process, and engage teachers in the grade levels and so forth. I expect that we'll see math performance increase as we continue with implementation of the new math curriculum in elementary. I think that even though we're just looking at our current sixth graders, some of the math performance of students who are in the chute, part of that is we didn't have as strong of a math curriculum in place in elementary that we do now. And I expect that we'll be seeing an increase in performance the longer we have implementation of the math curriculum at elementary in place.
Yeah, I'd like to just respond to some of that as well. And it's very similar along those themes. I also am troubled a little bit by our math, but pleased with our science and literacy performance. And also, as it has been thematic throughout, have wonders about special ed and wonders about ELL. Both of those are areas that we are constantly monitoring. It's a little dangerous to make generalizations with district-wide scores. However, I would tie it to curriculum. So if we look at science, for example, our science scores were in the toilet 10 years ago. And when Don was the superintendent, we did a big adoption of FOSS science kits, built it up at the elementary level, and all of a sudden now, 10 years later, our science scores are quite respectable. We also, if you look at our writing as opposed to reading, our writing scores are as good as you will find anywhere. And part of that is driven by the writing work that has been done specifically around the Columbia Writers Workshop, which is a curricular approach that we've taken for the better part of 10 years, I believe. And again, those scores are pretty outstanding. And we've only had this new math curriculum for a couple of years. So I think that there's some themes there. That said, part of the work that I think Tracy and the directors of school support are doing is going on a school-by-school basis and identifying kids and what kids are and are not performing in each respective area to see how we can improve those. Because, again, there's programmatic things we can do as a district, which are things like curriculum and professional development. And then there's individual things we do on a kid-by-kid basis at the classroom level through the school as the lens.
Okay, yeah, the ELL is another thing. I mean, we've talked about it before, but the math and science kind of jumped out at me as being, disappointing. With something like that, how should we track it I understand that below the district level, the schools will analyze the data and have their SIP plans and so on. At the district level, how should we, or maybe this is the discussion for the retreat, but what's the best way to track this and to think next year, what should we look at next year then for something like that to see whether we're satisfied with the progress that's been made?
Yeah, I do think that's a perfect retreat topic, which is we're really worried about this. Now do the deep dive and tell us what you can learn that is deeper, and tell us what we can expect to see in a year as a result of that deep dive, and then plan. So I think that's exactly the kind of question we should be asking at the retreat in January.
Okay.
And we kind of had that planned out with our 3-tiered goal-setting process, that the first tier is around the school goals, and then there's the district growth goals and district improvement goals, which is what you're referring to.
Okay. Anything else from other board members? Okay. Thanks,
Tracy.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have public comment on the superintendent search. So as probably all of you, at least many of you know, Chip is going to be leaving us at the end of the school year. I've repeatedly tried to talk him out of it, but so far failed. I'll keep trying, but don't have my hopes too high on that. So we have initiated a process to find a new superintendent. So during the month of October, we've been gathering feedback from the public via a survey, and I understand that we have over 1,700 responses so far, which is great. So
How many?
1,700.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're just getting copies of. Sorry, we're just getting copies of the ones that are separate emails.
Yes, correct.
Wow.
So we'll give you aggregate survey data as soon as it's closed, which is on October 28th, as well as the anecdotal data that comes with those, because there's open response in that survey as well.
Okay.
So the survey is open through this Friday, October 28th. So I would encourage those of you who have not already filled out the survey to go to, it's on our website, correct?
Yes.
To go to our website and fill out the survey. We have one person signed up to speak. Others are welcome to speak after if they so desire. So Bob Yoder.
Bob Yoder, Redmond area, addressing the Board of Directors tonight, and I wish you good luck in your search. The reason I decided to come up, I wasn't going to originally, was because I read here GP3 board job description, and that job description really stood out to me because, as you know, I've been writing you emails about how it's been my understanding the district doesn't have job descriptions for the administrators, and I guess that includes Dr. Kimball, or I should say the superintendent. So since this is a topic, GP Governance Process 3, and it's board job description, I assume that would be superintendent's job description. I would urge you to go through the process of writing a job description for the administration, starting from the top down, and this would be an excellent time to do that. So thank you.
Okay. Okay, is there anyone else interested to speak on the superintendent search? In particular, the things that we're looking at now are what kinds of qualities we would want in a superintendent and what direction the district should go in. If any people have thoughts on that. Okay, all right, seeing no one else, we can move on from public comment to superintendent report.
Thanks. Thanks, Robbie. The board has asked us to do a high-level look at the changes that are being suggested by the State Board of Education. And so I've asked Tracy to do a high-level summary for you of the State Board of Education changes and then our response to those. It is requested that any feedback to the State Board of Education be submitted by November 4th. So after you hear our report, certainly we welcome board comments, and then the board can either individually respond to the State Board, collectively respond to the State Board, or have us develop a response for you, depending upon your direction at that time. So, Tracy?
Okay. So the State Board of Education proposed changes are encapsulated on this slide, and there's a section really that focuses on credits, a section that focuses on the definition of credit, and then some additional changes to existing WAC and RCW language. So we're going to start with their recommendations that have to do with credit. And it's probably best to start with what are the current minimum state graduation requirements. So this is from OSPI, And you can see that the current state minimum graduation requirements are as follows: 3 credits for English, 2 credits in math, 3 beginning with the class of 2013, 2 in science, 2.5 in social studies, none in world language, 1 in visual performing arts, 2 health and fitness, 1 occ ed, 5.5 electives, for a total of 19 credits, or 20 beginning with the class of 2013 and beyond. So those are the current minimum state graduation requirements. Essentially, the state board is proposing that those minimum requirements increase from 3 to 4 in English, from 2.5 to 3 in social studies. They're clarifying that these 2 health and fitness credits are really a half a health credit and 1.5 fitness credits. And those increases would decrease the electives available from 5.5 to 4. The 20 credit requirement would remain intact. We currently have district graduation requirements that are more than the state minimum credit-based graduation requirements. So we've got these requirements in place for the classes of 2011, 12, and then these new requirements is just really a clarification around math and math science, beginning with the classes of 2013 and ending with the class of 2015. So you can see that we already have 4 English credits required for our students. We already have 3 social studies credits required for our students. We already separate out the PE and health. And we've got 6 electives available for our students because we have a 22 credit requirement in place. The state board really has an intention to help districts better align the state minimum graduation requirements with the minimum requirements that students need to be eligible to enter a 4-year university. So you can see that addition of the English credit, because universities are really saying students should have 4 years of English. The addition of the social studies credit, those are aligning with the minimum requirements for eligibility for entrance into a university. This is a little different from what the state board Core 24 is, because their current recommendations still result in a minimum state graduation, 20 credits, not 24. But you can see that they're beginning to align to their vision of Core 24, because it includes 4 English, 3 social studies, the half a health, 1.5 fitness, etc. But currently they're not recommending that the state go to a 24 credit requirement. You can see really this little box here highlights that what they're trying to ensure is at the end of 8th grade, all students enroll in a common career and college program of study, one that prepares them for all options after high school. So all options to include entrance into a 4-year university should the student choose to do so. You can see that part of Core 24 includes a 2-credit world language requirement, because if we look back at what are the universities requiring for entrance, 2 years of world language shows up there. We as a district, with the board, approved last year in the spring some new requirements beginning with the class of 2016 in our district. So again, the only change here, since we already have 4 credits of English, we already have 3 of math, 3 social studies, etc., is the addition of the world language requirement. So when, for the class of 2016, this credit requirement takes effect, the total electives go from 6 to 4, but the total credit requirement remains at 22. Now, we have a couple of things built into this plan that are important to highlight, and that has to do with students' ability to make substitutions based on their high school and beyond plan. Currently, State Board and OSPI, as they've implemented the 3rd math credit requirement, have included that something else, some other requirement for Algebra 2 if it's part of their high school and beyond plan. And we intend to, when the world language requirement comes into effect, allow students to sub something else per their high school and beyond plan should they so choose. And I'm going to talk in the next slide about what do we mean by subbing per your high school and beyond plan. The other part of the credit requirement recommendations that the State Board have to do with this 2-for-1 CTE requirement. So I'll give you an example. A student may choose to substitute a cross-credited CTE math course and take that instead of Algebra 2 because it better aligns with their high school and beyond plan and their post-secondary plans. That course, if the State Board recommendations take effect, allow the student to count it as their math credit and as their OC-Ed credit. So it allows cross-credited CTE courses to count in both areas. When we talk about subbing per high school and beyond, or when the state does, what they say is that students can substitute coursework for Algebra 2 in accordance with state law if other courses would better help them meet their educational and career goals as expressed in their high school and beyond plan. And we would allow that as well for students in the class of 2016. If their high school and beyond plan doesn't include, and they've made an informed decision that they are not going to be entering a four-year university and therefore don't need to earn 2 credits of world language, they can substitute something else per their high school and beyond.
And I just want to editorialize here a little bit. The nuance for us is that we are assuming that a student is wanting to be university prepared, and that not being university prepared, going another pathway, is certainly an acceptable alternative, but it has to be a deliberate exception, as opposed to a student not being university prepared and having the exception be to be on that track. And so that's how we have flipped it, by giving students the alternative should they decide to build as part of a thoughtful, directional plan as part of their career in high school, to choose to do something different, which would then they would be able to substitute out the world language as an example.
Sorry, so who judges that? So they write whatever they want in their high school and beyond plan, right? If we don't write the plan for them.
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't write the plan for them.
So they.
But we do actually approve the plan and help them with that plan, and we don't have the practice in place yet around the waiving or the subbing of the foreign language, because we aren't there yet. But one of the pieces of work that's underway right now is to beef up, if you will, the high school and beyond plan, because as we've identified in previous sessions, we have quite a bit of work to do to make it meaningful. So that's part of the work that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. So currently, just to add some clarification, the minimum state graduation required, if we just take math, that students have to earn 3 credits in math beginning with the class of 2013. So that language around subbing something here, the kind of typical 3 credits you're supposed to earn are algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. But there's already state language in place that says students can sub per their high school and beyond some other cross-credited CTE course for that algebra 2, as long as and there has to be a meeting with the parent and the student and the teacher. There's some very specific guidelines that have to be followed in order for that substitution to be made. So it has to, I don't have all of that in front of me, but all of that's already in place, beginning with the class of 2013 for the math requirement. And as we looked into that and worked with our high school principals around how are we going to make sure we implement this, it kind of surfaced that we need to strengthen what we're doing around the high school and beyond plan. And as Chip said, that work is underway.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doug. I was just going to ask, for high school and beyond plans, it's one thing to provide a sort of set of rules by which one must play them. It's quite another do we provide examples of approved high school and beyond plans that do substitute things in?
As I said, I think right now the high school and beyond plan is best characterized as a checklist. Mm-hmm. and light career inventories. Mm-hmm. We need to beef it up. so that it does as you suggest, which is provides really good, strong courses of study, which may not be necessarily the university course of study, and courses of study that are tied directly to particular career paths, even within the university track, if you will. So part of what we're doing is it's kind of a multi-tiered approach. So one is looking at signature programs in the high schools, which we've talked about. Another is doing a better job of high school and beyond planning so that those courses of study are actually tied to preferred career paths. And then thirdly, one of the pieces of work that we're doing is having culminating projects work in the senior year be more meaningful as it relates to that plan. And all of that is simultaneously going on right now. And all of it is exposing practice that is both promising and, frankly, practice we're not very pleased with. And we'll be reporting back to you what we're learning and what we're going to do about it again this year as we uncover this.
Yeah, right now, we don't have examples of here would be a four-year program of study if you're headed toward a four-year university. Here might be a four-year program of study example, but we talked about wanting to have those so it's
Yeah, it just seems
Clear.
like something
Yeah,
where
uh-huh.
I would hate to have every child have to reinvent a wheel for a career path. If someone finds the right formula for that, this is the career path, here's the study plan.
Right.
Right.
And just a four-year plan for making sure that you meet all of the graduation
Right.
requirements.
Yeah.
Right.
I just had a couple of questions. One is there a fiscal impact by the state board's decision in terms of, how it's impacted how we deploy resources and that sort of thing?
That all depends upon how we interpret fiscal impact. How's that?
Obviously, I'm looking for unfunded mandates.
Yes, I believe that there are unfunded mandates that are embedded into the work that they're doing, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. OSPI provided a report to the State Board of Education that said that the things that they are implementing do not have a fiscal note attached to them. I think that they overlook the overhead and management associated with even a small change in a requirement, what it takes. And I'll use a very specific example around proficiency credit they're proposing can be now offered as a result of these changing requirements. And Tracy's going to talk about that in a moment. But if you provide the ability to test out of a subject, for example, who's going to administer this test, who's going to assign the grade, who's going to do all this work if they're no longer in a class and doing this as part of a class where we pay a teacher to do that work? Well, nobody has an answer to that question, and there's no money connected to actually doing that, let alone the money to actually put systems in place for these changes. So I believe there are unfunded mandates embedded in what they're doing. The state board is either doesn't believe that's true or is ignoring them, and OSPI is not helping us in that case.
The other question I have, and this gets to my concern that potentially we're inadvertently, well, it's one of those unintended consequences, but by changing the requirements, are we going to increase dropout rates? And I guess what I'm getting to is what's the impact on the student's ability to choose electives? Mm-hmm. Let's say if a student is interested in the arts and pursuing a course in that direction, is this going to limit their ability to get those electives?
Yeah. I don't believe that the changes in requirement is going to impact our graduation rate, and I don't think it's going to impact our ability for students to choose electives if they have a career path that is a non-university career path. I do, however, think that the state board's change is going to change statewide graduation rates because they are upping the ante, if you will. And the reason why it's not going to impact us is because, A, the graduation requirement changes that the state is suggesting we already have in place, and the big one that we're doing around foreign language, 70% of our kids already take 2 years of foreign language. So the impact is on 30% of our students, and that 30% have a way out of that if they have a good high school and beyond plan. So again, I don't think it's going to impact our graduation rates, but I do think there'll be an impact statewide.
So I have the same broad concerns around subtracting 1.5 credits of electives. And the 1.5 credits of fitness, have they made any clarification on that, including team sports?
Yes, they have. Why don't I let Tracy work through the other two pots, if you will, and then we can come back to that.
Great.
So the pot that we've worked through so far really have to do with these bullets here where they're increasing credit requirements and so forth. And we just showed, and Chip just reiterated, that really those align to what we already have in place in our district. The next...
If we're moving off of those, except I'm still confused, they're no longer saying the Washington State history requirement is accredited, but can it be? I mean, when do we, I don't even know when we offer that.
We usually offer it before 9th grade.
So this change really doesn't affect our students.
Correct. The only students that affects is those students who come to us who have not been through our system, who have not taken Washington State history.
And right now, they're pretty, didn't I hear that they were taking it by online course?
Yes.
Because we just don't have time to fit it in high school.
Well, and what ends up happening is you end up having 5 students that don't have it. So then if you're going to offer it at a high school, then you have to run a class for 5 kids and you chew up your staffing as opposed to, and it's an anomaly. I mean, all the other kids have had it. So this way, by offering it online, you can accumulate kids around the district who don't have it, offer it online, get those credits taken care of, and don't have to chew up your staffing at high school.
If they are doing it as a high school student, can they get credit for it?
We do credit it now. I think it counts as an elective credit as opposed to...
It can count as elective.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in essence...
Is that right, Tracy? Am I
Yeah, I
answering
think
that
so. I
correctly?
mean, I know there's a place on the transcript that there's a box that needs to be checked.
Checked,
That the,
right.
that the Washington State history requirement's been met.
Yes. But I do believe they can receive elective credit for that. But it
That's a
does not.
choice.
But it does not count as social studies credit, as I.
Because I think typically, as you say, if you've been in our system, you've met that requirement
Right.
in the, by what you took in 8th grade.
Okay, well, since I didn't grow up here, I keep thinking maybe I ought to take that class. It's in my free time.
Okay, so there's 2 more buckets that we're going to cover, and the next one is about this language clarification, making things more concise and removing redundancies. And this gets into Chris's question about the PE requirement. So one of the areas of language clarification that we're most interested in has to do with what they're proposing around PE. Currently, RCW states that all schools shall emphasize the work of physical education and carry into effect the requirements, provided that individual students may be excused from participating in PE otherwise required on account of physical disability, employment, religious belief, or because of participation in directed athletics or military science and tactics or for other good cause. That's what the RCW says. The WAC further clarifies some things. It says that, those 2 health and fitness require, and now they're saying 0.5 health, 1.5 fitness. And it goes on to say that students may be excused from the physical portion of the fitness requirement under this RCW for these reasons, and such excused students shall be required to substitute equivalency credit in accordance with policies of boards of directors or districts, including demonstration of the knowledge portion of the fitness requirement. The WAC also speaks to this directed athletics word that's in the RCW, saying that directed athletics shall be interpreted to include community-based organized athletics. We've had a lot of confusion and questions around this issue. What the state board is proposing changing is crossing out some things in the WAC, and what the net result is that students may be excused from PE per RCW, so it doesn't change what this RCW says, but it changes what the WAC says, that such excused students, instead of substituting equivalency credit, now it just says that such excused students shall be required to demonstrate proficiency/competency in the knowledge portion of the fitness requirement in accordance with written district policy. It also strikes out this definition of directed athletics and how it should be interpreted. So the net result is, if this proposed change goes through, students may be excused from PE per RCW for the reasons stated in the RCW. Such excused students shall be required to demonstrate their proficiency or competency in the knowledge portion of the fitness requirement, and this definition of directed athletics goes away.
And just to editorialize a little bit, because this is really confusing, this is a good thing. The reason it's a good thing is what we are getting is OSPI opinion, auditor opinion, and RCW and WAC were contradicting one another. This removes the contradiction and says, yes, it can be, students can be excused. They need to demonstrate competency in the knowledge, and then district policy can drive how the fitness portion is waived, if you will, or excused, and that can include directed athletics either in the school or in the community as per district policy. So it gives us the freedom to do that. However, there is a requirement that says that students do need to demonstrate the proficiency and competency in the knowledge portion of fitness, so they have to demonstrate that, and there's no guidance at this point on what that means or looks like or how it's administered.
Well, aren't they developing, in the same way they've done for arts and social studies, aren't they developing?
CBAs.
CBAs.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it seems to me we just have, if that goes through, and I assume that's a WAC change, so are they, how far along are they with that proposed WAC change?
My understanding is
don't
they're
know.
taking comment and, from districts on all of these proposed changes, and their meeting is on November. They're taking comment until November
Relates to
4th.
these changes, yes.
So is the proposed change on the physical fitness substitution,
This is
that
part of the
WAC
state
language tied to their proposed
Yes.
graduation requirements? So we're on the same timeframe.
Yes.
So the district will need a clear policy.
Yes.
And some sort of incorporation of the CBAs, I
Yes.
would assume.
Or some other form of proficiency, depending upon what guidance we get from OSBI or the state. Yes.
Well, I suspect that they're going to want some demonstration of
Yeah.
the competencies.
How would that even work, though? I mean, in some things we can assess it, in others we can't.
That's a big question for us. Yes. So the good news is the language is clarified and there's a vehicle. The bad news is that assessing what they've put into it is a big question for us.
Yeah, and we don't have like a curling rink.
Right. And again, we've got, remember, this is the knowledge portion. So the CBA was not designed to be a proficiency of the knowledge portion. The CBA was designed to be a CBA for a course. So if a kid is being excused from a course, then what is it that they have to demonstrate as it relates to knowledge, and who's going to do that work? I mean, those are questions that we're trying to get answered.
So just to kind of summarize some of what's being said, the positive about this specifically is it clarifies the requirement and the fact that students can be excused for the reasons listed in the RCW without having to substitute equivalency credit. But if we go back to what the RCW says, is that they can be excused on account of physical disability, employment, religious belief, participation in directed athletics, military science, and tactics, or for other good cause. So one of the questions we have is, what constitutes other good cause? And how are we going to define directed athletics? Because it's the WAC is no longer saying directed athletics shall be interpreted to mean community-based athletics. So we still need to figure out what's directed athletics and what's other good cause. And will, districts have consistent interpretation? And, what's going to be our interpretation in our district?
To be perfectly honest, I don't care what the other districts think. No, seriously. I mean, this is something where it doesn't say that you can't give equivalency credit for a team sport. As a matter of fact, it seems silly to me.
You don't even need to anymore. You can just be excused for it. You don't even have to have
But this is something that I think actually does kind of help, is that I think if a kid's doing a school-based athletic activity, that is, they're running for the track team, they're not getting credit for that track team when their kid brother who's in PE is getting credit for PE. That's silly. We should be giving credit for our teams.
And if you remember in the memo that I sent to the board in this instance, is districts were giving actually equivalency credit as you suggested, and were told by was it OSPI?
It was OSPI.
By OSP not to do that.
Right, and I want to do that. I want to thumb my nose at OSPI, and this looks like this clarification lets us do so.
There's a difference between giving equivalency credit
Yeah.
and just waiving the requirement so that students have met the intent in terms of they have the fitness background because they've participated in these equivalency things.
Yeah.
But they're free to do other electives. I mean, where it comes up with is they simply don't have time in their schedule for all these classes.
I just don't see why we wouldn't give credit to anybody who's got.
Right. So can I
If it's
make
waivable,
Well,
it should
because
be
credit
equivalency credit.
means a
but-
whole different
Right.
ball of wax as far as I'm
So
concerned.
can I make a suggestion? Because I think the board, on a number of occasions, has expressed a lot of interest in this subject, and I think that we actually need to have an internal conversation about what we are going to do.
Yeah.
So what this does is this provides clarification of language that opens up, frankly, the door for us to do some additional things, and we have some questions about it. So and I think this language clarification is a good thing. So that's kind of the first step is, does the board support what the state board is doing, yay or nay? And then the next step is then we have an internal conversation about, all right, in light of this change, what are we going to do? And that we will put that on a board retreat item for us to talk about and decide what we're going to do.
I like that.
Okay, so just to kind of add the other piece of the proposed language from the state board, it clarifies that students who are excused still have to demonstrate proficiency or competency in the knowledge portion of the fitness requirement. So a question we have is, like Chip said, how is this done? Who assesses it? Who's managing and tracking it? If the student isn't enrolled in PE, and are there, costs associated with that? Yes, we think so. And then kind of to your point, Chris, what appears on the student transcript? If 1.5 credits of PE are required and we can excuse students, currently the state board isn't saying you can give them credit for it. You're just excusing them. So then, one question we have is what shows on the transcript that they were excused, and then they've got 1.5 credits they can earn in a different area, which is kind of Nancy's point. So,
And that's something where what's important to me is the language is not prescriptive, as far as I can tell, in their proposed revision. So it doesn't say we can't give them credit. It just says that you can fulfill the
But
requirement.
I
one way
still
or another.
contend that's a separate issue. Giving credit for team sports or other activities involves a different.
As long as we give credit for
Than
PE, I will
equivalency.
be in favor of giving credit for track, for soccer, for tennis.
And
There's
we
no
will
reason we
talk
should
about
not.
that at
That's
the
silly.
retreat.
Especially if they've got a 24 credit thing, we've only got 24 credits. If a kid's, there's already a loophole written in. You can drop 2 classes if, basically you can graduate with 22 credits as long as you can explain it really well. That's silly. But if we can get kids 25.5, they can fail 1 class and they still graduate.
and now I
Anyway.
think what you're referring to is the dropping 2. That's what the state board's saying. If and when Core 24 is implemented, they would give kids that too. But in our current paradigm of district credit requirements, 22 in these areas, there's no allowance for dropping anything. Just
Anyway,
But yeah, so anyway, this is where we are in terms of state board recommendations and
Right.
and on that piece. So that's one. The other language revisions are really about removing redundancies, and the biggest, most important one is the PE part. The final bucket,
Could you back up for 1 second?
yeah.
I just want to, if you notice in a little writing there, determined by about the middle of that first, determined by the Office of Superintendent to have no fiscal cost. So that's the language that is a little bit bothersome because it really does have fiscal costs. So, okay, go ahead, Trace.
Okay, so the last bucket that we're going to look at is this credit definition recommendation. So currently, a credit is defined in WAC as 150 hours of instruction. And students are enrolled in 1,000 hours of instruction per year. I think I got that right. They're in 6 periods a day in our district, but the state funds 5 periods a day. And in order to earn a credit in a class, students have to pass the class. And really the management of the participation in the course, what constitutes successful completion, that's really managed by the classroom teacher through grades they assign. And the management of overall kind of our students earning credits in the areas that they need to earn them for graduation, that's really managed by the school and the district staff, I mean, including registrars, counselors, administrators, data processors, et cetera. What the state board is recommending is that they strike this language around 150 hours of instruction equals a credit, and change that to successful completion as defined by district policy of courses taught to the state standards. And if there aren't adopted standards, then the local governing board would determine the standards for successful completion of that subject. Or that satisfactory demonstration by a student of proficiency / competency as defined by written district policy in the learning standards. What the net result of this is that the outcome is that there's now, if this recommendation goes through, there's flexibility within the 1,000-hour framework. So there's still the basic ed requirement for students to be enrolled in 1,000 hours of instruction. But if the recommendation goes through, instead of every period being created equal, that English is this long and it equals 150 hours, and math is this long and it equals 150 hours, districts would have some flexibility to determine the length of instructional time tied to each credit-bearing content area, and that it would provide for the potential of a competency-based system versus a seat time definition of credit. So there's kind of 2 parts to this. Some of the questions that we have are, how, it's saying a lot of things need to be defined by written district policy, and so we would need to define what is successful completion of a course, and what kind of assessments would be needed as evidence of that. It wouldn't just be you have to be enrolled in, you'd still be enrolled in the course, but how you earn credit would be based on your demonstration of proficiency. It might be helpful before we kind of get into questions to talk a little bit about what they already have done around world language. So State Board last year recommended, and they have a model policy in place, that districts adopt a competency-based policy for world language. And what they've done is they've put together a state-managed system. They have assessments, world language assessment days that are in place to support this effort. So what this really is for heritage speakers. So if a student is fluent in another language, they can go to the state assessment day, and they can take either a STAMP or ACTFL assessment, whatever is available for that language. It's administered not by us, but by people who manage the state assessment days. Students take the assessment, and depending on their proficiency level, if the district has a policy in place that allows for competency-based credit, the student can come back with a certificate that says, I am whatever level of proficiency, and I'm requesting 2 credits for that. And so that's a system that's in place right now. Some districts have a policy, and we've begun to look into this and met with OSPI representation and considering this recommendation for world language, especially as we bring on the world language requirement starting with the class of 2016. So this is an example of a competency-based credit system where students don't have to be enrolled in world language classes in our system, but there's a kind of a managed system in place for this, to support this effort. So one of our questions around this competency-based system is, unless there's kind of a similar system in place for other content areas, how are students going to be assessed for competency and proficiency, and how is that going to be managed and tracked and consistent across districts and or within our district, et cetera? So
that's like all of a sudden they're throwing in competency-based in the midst of continuing to increase credit requirements, but they're throwing it in without and saying it's just going to be a hodgepodge of whatever districts decide.
Yeah.
It's not even logical. I don't get it.
So it's an interesting environment because on the one hand, there's been lots and lots of testimony around flexibility, around competency, are we
Right.
holding kids
We've
back, et
asked for
cetera. And we've asked for it, exactly. The however is throwing it out there and saying that it's now possible to do this without the context of all the systems and all of the implications is a little bit haphazard. I agree.
A little bit.
And so here, just as a summary on kind of the way that we would suggest that we respond to these, we would respond by saying the following. So this is our recommendation to the board, and the board then needs to agree or not agree, and then figure out how you'd like to respond accordingly. First is we agree with the credit requirement changes. That's consistent with our current practice. Second is we have general support of the language clarification, specifically as it relates to PE. We do have concerns around how you manage it. So we have, and funding. I think them saying this a no-cost item is absurd. Thirdly, we have general support of the concept of flexibility and removal of the 150-hour requirement, with lots of questions, including funding, tracking, how does it impact college admission, how do you put it on transcripts, how do you staff it, how do you internally manage it, how do you assess it. So it's this overarching concern around implementation and funding, and so we believe that we should say, we believe the concept around flexibility and the removal of seat time is the right conceptual direction, that there are not enough systems in place today in order to actually implement that concept. That would be our recommendation of a response to those 3 items.
So you're looking for them to tell us, I mean, the funding is obvious. But other than that, they're basically leaving it, like, we could do nothing, right? And it would be.
Oh, absolutely.
So they're saying do something if you want to. Which,
That's right. And we could absolutely. They provided the door, if
Right.
you will, and we simply decide not to open the door, and there's no problem
So
in
in
not
that
opening
sense,
the door.
it's not harmful, right? 'Cause
I would
we
agree
can
with that.
choose to do it or not.
Although it is harmful from a state perspective if now you have lots of people doing these crazy things. I
crazy.
mean, one of the reasons for requirements is to make sure that there's some parity across the state. So absolutely, they could pass it and we could do nothing, but there is a parity across the state problem.
Right. So college admission, you would want some statement of, like, say, how, state universities would consider
Right.
these equivalencies. And
Right. So if we suddenly are now allowing students to not take government in their senior year, and they take a competency of some kind, will that help or hurt their college admission I mean, those are the questions we would ask. And if a student, for example, decides, I want to try and test out of biology, can a test truly determine whether a kid is competent in biology or not? And if they don't have that experience in a biology classroom. I mean, that's a good question for us to contemplate.
Right.
So Chip, it's funny, I partially agree. I'm also partially not on the same page. And I'm curious about whether it's our problem to decide whether or not the government equivalency is enough to get them into college. Mm-hmm. If government equivalency is good enough for a degree in our state, I'd say it's the student's job to figure out whether the schools they want to go to care.
I disagree. It is I mean, we have a goal to have students be college ready, right? We need to advise them at least, even if we allow them to do something, we should advise them on whether they will be college ready by doing it, right? If it won't make them college ready and we don't have to do it, then we should consider whether we want to.
Well, I guess I'm coming at it from the perspective of taking some AP tests without taking some AP courses. And the colleges didn't much mind whether or not you had taken a course that was labeled AP, as long as you'd taken the test. And so I feel like there are some metrics out there that are not our problem to develop, as far as equivalency
but even
goes.
in that case, I think that we should advise students on the ramifications of.
Okay, I'll give you advice. Force them to abide by rules is a different matter. Warn them, I'm happy to do.
I think
Warn
that
them,
the AP
advise
is
them
different too, though, right? Because you can be college ready without taking a particular AP
Well,
course.
to be perfectly honest, biology, I'd rather have a kid waive biology and take a genetics course over at UW.
Yeah, but that isn't what we're discussing here. What we're discussing here is this proposal from the State Board of Education to throw open this completely undefined way of dealing with something we've been asking for a decade or more, which is
And
a
if the barn door is
standards-based.
open, I say we go through it. I mean, I'm sorry, I am not reserved about this. If they do this, we do it. Go.
Right. So let me frame for you your options. So the State Board is asking for feedback. You can respond to the State Board individually as individual board members. You can respond to the State Board as a school board with some consensus, or you can not respond at all. I mean, those are your options. So you get to decide what it is you'd like to do with this information, knowing that November 4th is the deadline upon which they would like feedback.
So from that perspective, the most important thing I think that the administration can do for us is to put parameters around the questions on funding. Fundamentally, what is a no cost? If they're saying something's no cost, is it really to us? That's a really important question to answer. But for other stuff, I don't think we need to be fretting over, oh heavens, we've been given freedom. I would really be happy to have a vague set of language from SBE.
I see no reason to object to freedom.
Yes.
Right? But
My
I think
point.
it's legitimate for us to ask questions about, say, funding, right?
No,
College
there I agree.
admission. I think college admission is a totally legitimate thing to ask them about. Right?
Yeah.
I think we should ask the administration to respond to the Board of Health, the Board of Education for us.
And it's not mutually exclusive. I mean, I can write to our SBE members and express my
Right, we can do
enthusiasm
it
for loosening
individually
the
also, but I think
rope.
as a district, we should respond.
But as a district, I think we should respond. I agree.
And I think these are the right, comments and questions.
Yeah.
Why staffing and internal management, though? I mean, if they've kind of thrown it open, then and we do whatever we want, then how would they tell us about the staffing and internal management?
I'm not suggesting that they tell us the staffing and internal management. That's actually something that's connected to funding. What they do is say things like, well, heck, now you've got a competency-based system. You can just test kids and you're done, so it shouldn't cost you anything. Kids are now taking other classes. But the reality is, if you are testing 1,000 students in XYZ, somebody has to do that work. Somebody has to test them, track them, deal with it, and they don't build those into their assumptions at all. So that's
You're
what
saying
we
to kind of inform them that
Yeah,
there are
that it's a
such
problem.
requirements and ask them about
Right.
the
Yeah,
funding.
their
Right.
assumption is we're doing this stuff in one way or
Right.
another anyway, so it's not an additional cost just to do it differently.
Right. It
And
is-
your position is that, yes, it is an additional cost.
Right, that's right. It is the famous, we would like just to know this one piece of information, and heck, just have a secretary do it. And when you do that 100 times in a year, 100 little things to do turns into a full-time job, and nobody thinks about that. That's the thing that goes into these kinds of requirements.
Well, and it goes back to the thing that's been put on hold, which is that basic ed funding doesn't fund basic ed funding.
Yes.
And every time you change something like this, it funds it even less.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
So I guess here the thing, instead of giving us, I'd like to express support to the SVE. I like the direction this is going, obviously. I do think that in addition to worrying about the concerns on funding and management, sort of the logistical pieces, expressing some requests or some desire for examples. I mean, I just looked up a fitness proficiency exam. California does one in 5th, 7th, and 9th grade, the fitness gram. There's one that already exists off the shelf. Could we use that and be done with it?
Well, I think it's a little more complicated with our state requirements, but there is stuff coming or available. That isn't really probably going to be an issue.
Yeah, so basically if they can provide examples to point at as for world language.
Right. So what I heard Nancy suggest is that the administration go ahead and generate a response, and if the board is comfortable with it, let me describe what that response would look like. It would be similar to what this slide says, which is we support the credit requirements, we support the language changes, and again, we generally support the concept of flexibility. However, we have some pretty significant questions about the mechanics of how it would work, and would suggest that before they launch open with this, that they begin to articulate how those mechanics may work and or be funded, because this is an unfunded mandate. Is that a fair
Sorry,
reflection? of
which
the
part
board?
is an unfunded mandate?
The 150-hour definition within the 1,000-hour frame.
I thought it's not a mandate, though.
Yeah,
It's
you're
an
right. Okay, let me,
unfunded option.
It's an unfunded option. That's
Right?
fair.
I mean, we could
Yep.
say this is
You're
awesome,
correct.
but we can't afford
Yep,
it.
you're correct.
Do nothing. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
I can generate something like
Yeah.
that if that's
Okay.
agreeable to the board. Okay. Thank you, Robbie.
Sure.
Unfunded mandate, that's an option. That's fair. I love that word, though.
I just want to, I don't want to
Yep.
get to where, if we be inaccurate about it, then it
Yep.
looks like we're just complaining. Okay. Anything else for superintendent report?
No.
Okay. Next up, legislative update. Doug.
Yeah, quickly, three things. Our state association, WASDA, is drafting legislative priority statement. In other words, a one-page statement for the upcoming special session and the next biennial session, or the next session that begins in January. And just briefly, they break down the statement in three parts: basic education funding, essentially sustaining current levels of funding for the implementation of the new definition of basic ed, suspend new funding, in other words, no new mandates that require funding, funding local effort assistance, which of course doesn't mean anything directly to us, but to the majority of the school districts across the state, it does, who receive LEA, it's a big deal. And then in terms of timing and funding, avoiding mid-year or retroactive cuts, which of course we had fun with last time. Stop using the school district fund balances to backfill state cuts. And I know that's something near and dear to Nancy's heart. And shifting the June 30th, 2013 apportionment payment to July 1st, 2013. And then finally, in terms of school district relief, make voluntary most current state level requirements for K-12. And that cuts at the state level, so we're not forced to bargain things at the local level. And finally, provide statutory relief from locally bargained contracts. So that's in draft form right now, but you can see it's kind of an interesting approach that our association is taking really for the first time. And some of those not necessarily things that, that we're excited about, but this is kind of where the things are going at the state level. In terms of also related to legislation, representatives of the East Side districts, including, of course, this one, and our surrounding neighbors met with State Representative Ross Hunter and Representative Marcy Maxwell a week ago for breakfast. So over 2 hours, we had a pretty lively discussion. There's no question that there will be cuts in resources. Most of that will probably come out of LEA, which, again, as I mentioned earlier, we don't receive LEA, but obviously we're concerned about any effort to change our levy lid, which was raised. But that would be kind of problematic, given the fact that any change to a levy is problematic. In other words, you can't just change a levy in midstream because it's set and it's collected. It's not like cutting a grant of LEA money. So there's going to be an interesting divide and conquer effect by the legislature as they cut LEA, because that's going to exacerbate resentment by districts that receive it against districts that don't, like ours, who have a higher levy lid. So anyway, stay tuned for that. And then lastly, our national association is very pleased with the fact that we've had some impact on the renewal of ESEA, which is really contains No Child Left Behind. And so that's beginning to make appears to be moving through the Senate, the U.S. Senate. And some of that may be caused by the fact that the president is making some executive order changes that have kind of forced the Senate, I think, to get off the dime. So it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. But so far, our National Association is very pleased with the amendments that are being proposed in the Senate version. So we'll stay tuned and see how that develops.
Okay. Any discussion? Great. Thanks, Doug. Next is board follow-up. So any items from previous meetings to follow up on? Doug, anything? Okay. Future agenda items? None? Okay. Debrief? Okay. Board member comments? Nothing. Well, we're just breezing
Well, you're
through.
efficient board chair.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just frightened everyone with my demeanor. Okay. So we will be going into recess for executive session, I believe, after which we will return to the board meeting very briefly to adjourn. Of course, people are welcome to stay. I don't highly advise it since we won't be in the room. Okay, thanks. We are in recess.